It was Saturday night in January. The cold was outside. My parents were to spend 2 hours the following night over there amongst some of their cousins. They wanted to take me along with them, but I begged them not. It was too cold. And anyhow, I wanted the first night after 2 years in which I am 19 all myself. That's how, at any rate, I explained it to my parents. I hadn't finished many tasks anyway, and a hollow feeling and a listlessness seized upon me. I closed the door, checked it twice. It was because of my father's penchant for getting me to do the same that they drove off, disappearing down the driveway in the car. It had been pretty quiet in the house for its din of sound it tended to be when chattering went on. I shook that off and decided it was only because of a general lack of noise. I lit a few candles in the living room and then turned on the cozy lamp at the corner for that warm feel. Curled up with my laptop on the couch. The pouring rain against the windows created such soothing sounds. My hours passed doing work on my assignments, sometimes glancing at my phone to scroll through social media. It had to be just about 11 o'clock when the rain really started storming. Thunder began to roll in from miles away, and the wind started wailing like a banshee. I was a wee bit not chilled out, but I was just letting the storm make my imagination all the more vivid. I still walked around to make sure all the doors and windows were tight and locked. They were. I had settled myself to watch the crime documentary. I got my bowl of popcorn and settled on the couch. It was by midnight that I heard the sound, a faint scrape which sounded like dragging some fingernails across the wood, and I stopped with the show and listened close in order to breathe with the rest that listened keenly to that stormy sound. It came again, scrape, scrape, seemed to be coming from the back door. I was there, pinned there, holding onto the edge of the couch cushion as if this somehow shielded me from the growing fear inside. The rational part of the brain just kept on going and trying to explain it away as just the wind or some branch scratching against the door. But it was too deliberate and too rhythmic. I opened my mouth to get a gulp of fresh air and, dipping into my trousers pocket, flipped my phone light on too. For after hearing that scraping was how this session was ending, it ended there. It had gotten to that room in my kitchen where this sound was taking place. That was the reason this creaked little softer. It was just perhaps what for all that mattered was, after all, a microsecond before it turned and headed in, pulling the curtain far away from that window, covering that teeny little window on that back door. And no one was there. I stood stiff, closed the door again just in case, and went back to the living room. I tried to ignore that fear, but my nerves were very on edge, still. The storm outside was getting louder and louder. Each creak of the house seemed magnified. About 1 a.m. there came a soft knock at the front door. I had reached that point by then, which I could reach the door. My ear was almost on peephole in it. For the darkness, whatever was within my view range, no one could see him if that person had been visiting. My stomach cramps. "Hello," my quivering voice called out, but there was no reply. Not even a breathing sound could I hear but the rain pounding against the roof of the porch. "Who is there?" Another yell echoed back, this time louder than the first, still dead silence. So I turned from the door and consulted my better judgment, which told me to make some noise and yell for help. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone to dial my dad. Voicemail. My mum. The storm must have knocked out the line. Panic was starting to set in. And then suddenly, it was all so silent. Slowly I climbed the stairs, hugging my phone to my ear as I step by step mounted Everest. The upstairs hall was dark, or so it seemed, since all I could catch of my bedroom night light shone through into the hallway. My heartbeat throbbed in my ears as I moved toward that sound. It had shoved me over to the guest room on the far side of the hall. The door had swung open for just enough room to look into and see where the edge of the bed went. I was shaking terribly, but I shoved the door the rest of the way open. It looked empty, or at least looked like it always seemed to. I was almost letting out a sigh of relief when my eyes fell on something that seemed absolutely out of place. A set of muddy footprints leading from the window to the closet. My heart nearly stopped. The window was ajar, the latch broken. Someone had been in here, or worse, they still were. Slowly piddling out of the room on tiptoes without a single noise, I then headed downstairs and ran through the hallway, when adrenaline was helping clear out the fright in my chest, since I locked myself inside the bathroom and was dialing 911 with shaking hands. It was the gentle voice of the operator. a lifeline to this desperate human. I told her the situation, speaking all these words in disorganized haste. She said officers were already on their way and asked me to stay put on the phone. I listened so hard for a sound outside my bathroom door, straining my ears not to make it labored from the breath being held. It was as if those minutes in the hourglass equaled hours. And then I heard it, that unmistakable thud on the stairs, the creak of every step. Slow and deliberate. Whoever was out there wasn't in any kind of hurry. My stomach churned with fear. There was a silence at the door just back of the bathroom. I bitten hard onto my hand until I could not cry. Slowly inside, the doorknob shook. I hissed into the telephone's receiver. "Someone is trying to get in." "The officers are almost here," she said. "Shh, hold on this line." The doorknob wouldn't budge, though I could pick up on what sounded like barely there shallow gasps on the opposite side. Hard enough thumped in my chest that I imagined anyone on that other side knew my heart pounded violently. And in a matter of moments, as though someone turned them off at switch, those hollow breaths went mute, dead quiet. 2 minutes went by and then I heard the sirens, and there in the distance flashing red and blue lights illuminated the front yard, filling me with relief. The police let everyone know they were there, so I was finally safe enough to unlock the bathroom door. They had carefully checked the house from all sides, but could not find anybody there. It was only the muddy prints in the guest room and the broken catch of the window that showed that he must have been around in the premises somewhere. They assured to patrol round the block from all sides and suggested that I go away for the night. I wouldn't have denied anyway. So far, I do not know who was in my house that night or what his motives were. The police never caught anyone, nor did they report another attempted break-in in the area. Still, every time I come home alone, I feel that someone is watching, waiting for just the right time to attack. It was Friday night, the whole weekend my own. My mum and dad had town to visit to see my aunt, who happens to live in a whole different town. Because of this, I decided to spend my weekend around the house without stepping out, because Mama and Papa always come back anyway. Really, someone loved that again. The place was left with its thoughts and mess for itself. At least for the weekends, one could get by for a few days on 17 with just about anything around there. I ordered in a pizza, programmed all my favorite horror movies to sleep over in the living room. The television lit the walls, but outside thunder boomed through at times, adding its contribution to the setting. It had rained all since late afternoon and had a soft moaning whisper of wind against the windows. Just that perfect night in scene. Nothing to worry about. It was 10, and I got so interested in my second film when I first heard it. It was a sound only the faintest rustle that you would think it hardly could carry above the patter of rain against the panes, and not much like that either. The smallest possible patter, as though something had dropped. I stopped the film and turned towards the kitchen. Apparently, the noise was from that direction. I froze. I must have imagined it. It had to be just the wind. I turned back to reading, kept watching, but sensed something was amiss. Every other minute or so, something out of my corner of the eye down that hall leading into the kitchen would appear. Then again, thud. Louder, clearer this time. My stomach balled up inside me and I turned off the movie again. "Hello?" I shouted, trying to sound more convincing. No reply. Only the drumming of the rain on the window pane and the refrigerator humming. I went inside my house to check if everything's all right. Too silent. I walked in the hallway when I started to feel that something was very amiss. Light swirled around the kitchen. Everything appears to be just fine. Absolutely nothing is amiss. And then when I walked out, I realized that something was off. The back door, of which I was confident enough to proclaim was locked tight, was open a fraction of an inch. I shut my eyes in terror. "Soft," I whispering, "not a chance." I went straight to the door and closed it. I locked it, I guess. My mind might have snapped in the lock to twirl 2 times. In my head was an idea of having my mind think that I might have forgotten how the door unlocks. Little did I know my subconscious, other than ideas. Suddenly I went crazy, racing through my house trying to clear my head. I looked in every nook and corner and even all closet rooms with each door. Nothing seemed any different. It wasn't until I opened the living room that I could start feeling myself as slightly getting back a bit of comfortable. Perhaps, maybe I actually left it open. Perhaps probably that I am starting to lose my mind since while getting it up, the movie I just dropped wherever from. It was near midnight when I heard it once more, that sound that ran my blood. And this time there was no uncertainty, the creak of the floorboard from upstairs. My body held its breath, straining to listen, as though wishing it might not be so. But again came that sound. Somebody was up there. Now my heart began to run. I stretched ahead for something there on the table before me, on the coffee table. It was a metal candle holder. From one step onto another then, I proceeded for the stairs. The light emitted from my mobile phone was poor enough not even to cast adequate illumination of any kind upon a silhouette of each step. Every groan from a groaning in pain lay under my body weight. This house upstairs did not seem like breathing. It must be coming from my parents' bedroom at the end of the hall, and I pushed on the door with my foot, just to push it open a little wider. The crackling of the streetlight outside threw shadows eerily on the inside. I grasped the candlestick tightly and kicked the door open a little wider with my foot. It was empty, although I might have felt something in the room at the time. This feeling of empty air, somewhat like the wide open window and the driving rain on sill. I can only remember that it was shut up. My panic reached its height when I went out that room, seeing every possible corner there was for something alive. That is when I heard it, this low drag and shuffle sound in bathroom along the hall. I almost gasped upon entering the bathroom. The door was closed, but that room light was on. The shaking in my hand had reached such heights that barely I could twist around the doorknob. Collecting all that power of strength and the guts, turned the doorknob round to push open that closed door. No one had ever gone in that bathroom. There was, however, a window open above the sink from which water fell in little rivulets on tile floors when hit on the sill from above. Dreaded looking down there, I found myself standing for, suddenly I felt, understand something. That whatever it had inside the house may have probably moved out, coming through these windows to exit that house. As if the small sleep that might have reached up to soothe me a little bit, an almighty noise upstairs caused my hand to jump and nearly spill the candle out of shock. Down it came. First, it had been deafening crash, then came running up the stairs while scrambling to try and get upstairs and away. It was during this period that the jelly legs, adrenaline, pushed me up. I went into the sitting room, and there was this noise's origin. The wind has flung open the front door rather wide, and here are some papers and books lying in the floor of the shelf, and was made to seem that literally somebody rummaged through them. This had to take thrice. Fast hand trembles were needed because the door will slam shut if it's just locked. I immediately reached out for my phone and called 911. The voice was pretty shaky, trying to talk over the phone of the circumstances before presenting it to the operator on the other line. She told me that some officers are heading my way and urged me to take a position in a place of safety. So I got myself into the pantry and clutched onto that candlestick like my salvation. It was hours waiting in the minute. Anything outside, any creak made me awake. Every windy blast when I already stopped. Hearing sirens get closer and closer as policemen begin announcing themselves. They looked round each single corner and hole in the house, but could not find anybody sitting inside anywhere. It is pretty obvious that whatever was left there had to sit in for quite some time. They told him that he is a burglar, and not going to take the assumption that someone is sitting inside there. They told him over the night I shall be in some neighbor's house, promised him he would provide an actual view around. To this day, I'll never forget the feeling of being hunted in my own home. The thought that someone had been watching, waiting for the right moment to strike, still haunts me. I've since invested in better locks and a security system, but I'll never shake the memory of that night. Being home alone will never feel the same again. It was one of those quiet evenings in the house as usual. My parents had gone out of town to attend a wedding and were not returning the following morning. Being alone was perfectly normal for me. Bothered me in any way, that is, with nothing bad, since I rather wanted that time which I could spend only at home by myself. I would spend the whole day sitting there watching a few television shows, getting my takeout order delivered into the apartment, maybe scrolling through social media until late at night. Day had started on the late fall evening, when I was hoping for the traditional Chinese food, that is, in bulk, and being capable to devour in their entirety lying across on the living room couch, just where television viewing used to oblige crossing beams of the picture. It was dark, pitch perfect. The outside world, some spotty hooting of a cricket above it, and that deathly silence unnervingly spreading over the streets in an extremely usual manner for the place in that suburban setting, however very unusual it was on such an evening. It must be about 9 o'clock now. I have nearly finished my food and then started noticing this noise. It was just like some steps somebody did up to our driveway kind of noise, I'd say, for footsteps. So, my program was on, so I paused, started listening. I hardly heard anything apart from this humming noise that this air conditioner unit made on the distant side. I think that should be my imagination. I started viewing my program. I heard it again within 10 minutes. This time it sounded louder and more defined. It almost seemed like the person walking up my driveway. My heart is racing just as I turned down the TV volume and quickly reached out to take my phone. Peering out into the window showed no one had flickered the motion sensor above my garage, and there was nobody outside. Probably just a stray cat, I told myself. But some part of me didn't believe that. I walked over to the front door, examined the lock. The windows were latched, I told myself. Then I turned off most of the house lights, leaving a little lamp burning in the living room. Seemed safer that way, darker. Maybe it could hide me if there really was someone out here. Then I start to hear this other noise before I even realize it, which begins by sounding like a light tap on the glass, as if someone was knocking softly. By this point, my blood had frozen because I began to question where the noise could be coming from. The sliding glass door in the back of my house. Slowly, I crept towards the kitchen where the door was located. I walked into the kitchen and stayed in the dark, peeking around the corner to where the sliding door was. I hadn't seen anything at first, but then caught a glimpse of a figure standing just beyond the glass. I have my cell phone on my hand, and 911 dials are ready at every turn of mine. End. It was dimly lit by the faint light of the porch, so I could not make much of it at first. The guy was in dark clothing and covered skin because of the hood over his face. He was motionless, as if waiting for something. I panicked. With my heart racing, I ducked back behind the wall and fastened my mind on an appropriate decision. Call the police, confront him, pretend I wasn't home. My hands shook so much I could hardly unlock my phone. Before I could decide what to do, I heard the sliding door rattle. "Go away," I yelled, my voice shaking. And there I was, standing there for 1 minute. And then out of nowhere, that guttural chuckle rippled my flesh. "I know you're in here," the low, deep voice echoed once again. I said nothing. I just turned from the kitchen and walked upstairs into my bedroom and locked the door. I was pounding my heart on that phone as I dialed 911. I was whispering on that phone and told her the whole thing. She said that the officers were on their way and to stay on the line. At such moments, I could listen to this one man moving about in the house, this thumping against the windows, jigging the door lock, and in between banging on the handles of the locks, I could hear his movements also, which rendered this otherwise sultry night menacing. "They are coming," I whispered to myself, holding those very words the operator gave me. Then I heard crash from downstairs, and my belly fell because the man broke one of the windows. The woman operator heard it too. She asked me to hide somewhere. I started hearing the huge steps of this man as he entered the house, crunching glass under the shoes. So he was in. I hold my breath and remain still. The footsteps coming through the house are slow, but they have to be very quiet. He is looking for me. Please, God. I hope he won't think of looking upstairs. My phone was still buried in my ear, the operator telling me to hold on and that help would be there any moment. Their footsteps were approaching and getting loud. He was muttering to himself. I did not know what he was saying, but the noise was soft. My bedroom door was flimsy or delicate because it was too feeble to keep him away from entering my room. I looked at the room in the expectation that I would see something which could be used to protect me from him. I was focusing my attention on a single large table lamp in the room. I gripped the lamp and stood against the door. I heard the first creak of the stairs as I had. The man froze. For a moment there was silence, then I heard him bolt back down the stairs and out through the broken window. I remained frozen in place until the sound of his footsteps faded into the night. Inside the house door was broken window, and there were smudged prints of mud when police had arrived. They asked for that man, but did not find anyone. Then one of those officers turned me, and said it was right to hiding there, and raised such an alarm in the very first instance. But shock little did to still my nervous condition. The second night was also sleepless. All that creaking and groaning of the house would shoot my anxiety sky high. The whole affair would replay in my head, speculating on what might have been if the police had not arrived when they did. Even today, I am frightened whenever I sit in a silent house. I feel this sense of being watched or waiting for that never leaves one in their lifetime. Being home alone would never be the same again.